Hello and welcome to our Minds and Money 5 at 5 show, which this week is sponsored by Royal Road Minerals, Sonoro Gold and Geophysx Jamaica, and is brought to you in association with Resource Global Network. For those of you attending 5 at 5 for the first time, the aim of 5 at 5 guests at 5 p.m, although this week we have 6 guests, is to maintain engagement between investors and miners through a lively, interactive format whilst we rate the return of physical events. A few admin announcements before we start. To make the show as interactive as possible, please have your video switched on, and then you can submit questions either via the chat function, which you'll see at the bottom of the screen. I've already seen a few of you started to post messages in the chat room, or you can also wave your hands virtually on the invite participants button. We will then go and unmute you, and then you can then go and ask your questions live. We'll also be having polling questions throughout the webinar where you can vote. Being towards the end of the week, of course, encourage you to have a glass of wine or beer, sit back and relax and enjoy. For this week's show, we have a Latin America Caribbean themed focus, and as discussed, we have a great lineup of guests. They are Tim Coughlin, CEO of Royal Road Minerals, Ken MacLeod, President and CEO of Sonoro Gold, Robert Stewart, Managing Director of Geophysx Jamaica, Michael Colligan, Partner of Blue Lakes Advisors, Martin Valdes, Partner and Head of Fund 7 at Resource Capital Funds, and Remi Piet, Co-Founder and Senior Partner of Embellie Advisory. Without further ado, let's sort of dive in. Remi, you've been covering Latin America's mining sector for many years. If you had to pick out one or two trends over the last 12 months, what would they be?
Well, obviously you have the general trends that, around the globe of, the impact of the COVID pandemics and still the fairly steady demands of raw material, especially from Asia. Very important in the region when we're going to be speaking about Jamaica with the investments from Japan and China in the country recently. But those actually offer a series of opportunities also because of the demands of the community. If you have a company that is well organized in terms of their social license to operate and being able to engage with communities, you had an opportunity here with the COVID to actually build some real trust and bond. And so that happens in a series of different countries. Maybe the 2 or 3 key factors: the rise of informality, especially in the gold sector. And we have a series of companies here presenting in the gold sector. Again, if you understand the difference between informal gold miners and criminal gold miners that use gold for money laundering, you have a position of strength to be able to supply and get some support from the informal actors community. A second one would be a rise of the indigenous communities movements across the Americas, and we've seen, for example, in Ecuador, the movement from Yacu Perez getting 17% in the elections, and there's a Pan-American movement towards indigenous communities that will be important to survey and monitor for the next few years. In Colombia, for example, in Nariño, I know Tim has a very good team in place for security issues, but there's elements of indigenous communities also that are important to monitor, and I'm sure Tim will maybe mention this, and importance of ESG. Maybe the last element, which I think is the more important, is the question of political stability. We're looking at different jurisdictions, obviously, here, but there's an emergence of the regionalizations of politics, meaning that it's not only about having good ties at the capital city, but much more at the regional level. Jamaica is a very interesting case here with the stability in the elections of a new regime in 2020. So that's not so much of a concern from investors, and there's good opportunities there. But in the case of Mexico, you're gonna have elections in 2021 at the local level in Sonora, and I'm sure we might mention this in his talk. In Colombia, there's the importance of the situation in Antioquia for Tim Coughlin, and in Nicaragua, obviously the Ortega regime is coming to an end. So that's the question here is, how do you move forward and interact better at the regional level to make sure that your projects are going on track? There's plenty of opportunities over the last few months because of COVID, but the right process needs to be put in place, and it's going to be great to listen from the different companies and other experts to see what they saw on Latin America also.
Okay, that's kind of a really kind of great overview. Just bringing in Martin Valdes from RCF on the investment perspective. I'm just kind of quite keen to understand, I guess, what are the key investment themes that you're currently seeing in Latin America over the last 12 months?
Thanks, Andrew. Well, in terms of investment themes, definitely battery metals. It's all about, again, the future of electric vehicles, electrification in general. I think the recent announcements of, for instance, China making the commitment to going carbon neutral in 2060. The amount of copper that will be needed actually to do around that, it's massive. So that's definitely sort of one of the investment themes that are going around this region. Obviously, lithium coming out of Chile and Argentina in the brine space, it's quite relevant. And obviously copper coming out of Chile, Peru mainly, and also from other places. Colombia also trying to develop, and we're invested in a company in Colombia actually with a few projects, exploration projects in the copper space. I think it's all around, again, battery metals in general, Andrew. That's the main thing that we have been seeing in the last 12 months.
Mm-hmm. And just bringing in Michael Colligan from Blue Lakes Advisors. Do you have any investments in Latin America, or do you have any investments in the Caribbean?
Not in the Caribbean, but we do have investments in Mexico and also in Peru. So we've got a taste of some of that. We've been looking at projects in Brazil recently, and I think that there's a lot of opportunities in some of those countries. Obviously, as investors, we watch the political situation very carefully, because in the past there have been problems with some of these countries. But I think that on the whole, the investment climate has been improving steadily for most of Latin America. Obviously, there are the intense outliers like Venezuela, but they can sort of be ignored. They don't represent anything except an exception to the rule.
Okay. Coming back to sort of like Remi, I think one thing that's obviously COVID-19 is obviously being hugely impactful all over the world, obviously over the course of the last 12 months. How well, in your opinion, has Latin America dealt with COVID-19? I guess how well has the mining industry in Latin America dealt with COVID-19?
So that's a good question and good change of question. Because obviously the way that Latin American dealt with it has been quite catastrophic in different countries, especially with political scandals of elites just taking vaccines before everyone, which led to the lack of credibility of government and institutional actors in the countries. The mining companies in many instances actually have stepped up and been able to showcase their dedication to the mining territory by helping on bringing in oxygens or different equipment that has been noted in the public opinion. That has led to a series of different conflict, and Michael was mentioning Peru, obviously the case of Arequipa, between the governor of Arequipa blocking the arrivals of respirators, which were deeply needed in Arequipa. But those are elements where we can see the importance of formal activities and some elements where the discourse can change on the ground and getting the investment on the ground accepted by communities. I'm talking about really the methodologies of above the ground risk, of reputational impact, operational impact, social and political analysis here.
Sure. Also, like in like your open comments there, Remi, you also touched on sort of like ESG. So I'm just kind of interested just to go back to our other two sort of like panelists, just in terms of, I'm kind of interested to understand, Martin, from an investment perspective, what are the key ESG criteria that RCF use before making an investment? And but perhaps you could outline the sort of top 2 or 3 kind of questions that you're looking to find out from a mining company before you go and invest.
Sure. Look, ESG for us has been quite important for 6 or 7 years. We actually have a couple of, we have people inside RCF that are fully dedicated to cover the ESG side of our investment. And we have had these people actually for, again, 6 or 7 years. So we have always tried to be at the forefront of ESG. Obviously, in the last, 24 months, ESG has gotten a significant boost. Every conference, if you read annual reports of mining companies, I think everyone's dedicating a big chunk of a big chunk of their communication towards their efforts on ESG. So for us, actually, I can't actually say which are the 2 most important, but it's quite important, again, the relationship that you have with the communities. If at the end you don't have the support of a community, the mine will never be built. Doesn't matter how well economically that mine actually or that project looks, but if you don't have the support of the community, or if you don't have the support of the government, definitely that will never become a mine. So, and unfortunately, that's a relationship that is not actually in 12 months or what they have done in a year or 2 years. Actually goes from the inception of when they started that project, and it could have been 20 years ago. So it's quite important, again, to take a look to the history around that, spend significant time actually talking to the communities and understanding, again, the main what is going on between the mining company and the community.
And for yourself, Michael, what are the keys of ESG criteria that you use?
Well, we use the same ones as everybody else, but I think that for a couple of reasons, we've been quite interested in the G side of things. Everybody is very focused on the environmental aspects, and that's appropriate, of course. But long-term relations with politics, with government, and with governance in the broadest sense is really very important. And it's one of those things that it's more difficult probably to quantify than some of the other aspects, but we think that it's extremely important. And in the projects we've been involved in, it's been a paramount interest for us, not just something that comes along in the van, but also something that we look at early on, and we try to understand the philosophical starting point of the people that are behind the project. It has to be consistent.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. So I think then, without further ado, let's move on to the first mining update of the show. After a distinguished career, Tim Coughlin, after a distinguished career which took Tim Coughlin around the world through diverse countries such as Papua New Guinea, Iran, Turkey, and Bosnia, he established Royal Road Minerals in 2014, where they have projects in Colombia and Nicaragua. Tim Coughlin, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Andrew. I mean, I sort of feel like I'm risking going from what was a pretty sophisticated and urbane conversation right then to something that's a bit pedestrian. So what? I mean, I think I was really interested in Michael's comment and also, obviously, Remi's insights into some of these environments, and really we just touched on the touch points of mining investment in Central and South America then. And so I'm going to do this really quickly in terms of what we do. It's very easy to find out what we do. So I'll do it quickly and then maybe go back to questions and conversations, which will probably naturally lean towards these, ESG, and particularly the focus on governance. Thank you, Michael. ESG issues and politics, security risk, and indigenous communities, all the stuff that we have to deal with. So what we do, we dive right into the deep end. We basically do large scale exploration, and by that I mean we're very, very large tenement holders in Colombia and in Nicaragua. We're looking for very large ore deposits. We have very strong walkaway criteria. I think we've evidenced that probably, well, most acutely in the last 4 or 5 weeks, but actually over quite a long time. There's probably only a handful of companies who sort of do what we do. Our team was a team that probably used to be bolted onto a major company before, workplace health and safety became such an issue, and exploration teams were less of a logical fit with a big mining company. And so we have a hierarchical approach to our projects where we move them all the way, and discovery is what we're really aiming for here. We can't afford to ignore the possibility of opportunities in acquisition, but we're really looking to find something new. We've done that. So we were drilling a skarn that we found in Nicaragua over the last couple of years. We've just consummated a transaction on that one. We're drilling a new, very exciting, we think it's an alkaline system. It's completely concealed. And I think I'm right in saying it's the only, what I mean by that is it's under laterite and soil cover. I believe it's the only concealed discovery in Nicaragua that's ever been made to this point. So we're very excited about that. And then there's a bunch of other things. We're drilling in Colombia at a project called Quintanillo Margaritas later on, well, in April actually. And then pushing some highly prospective but very complicated projects in the area that that Remi alluded to and which, you know, the geologists would probably all nod and agree is highly prospective, a belt of porphyry, copper and gold, or belts of porphyry, copper and gold in southern Colombia. But I think we'd also all agree that very complicated from a social and a security risk perspective. And so we, you know, we're okay. We have shareholders that have been very patient with us, and we've been very clear about our strategy in southern Colombia, which is slow, and then we move a hell of a lot quicker up in northern Colombia and also in Nicaragua. So that'll do my pitch, and happy to take some questions.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much for that. I might just turn over to Martin of RCF at first. Do you have any sort of thoughts or questions for Tim?
Sure, Tim. Regarding Colombia, we have an investment there as well, exploring for copper porphyry in El Chocó. And our experience, obviously, and we're very close to the government. We have been following again what they're doing. But we feel that at the end, they started actually in the right path probably 3 or 4 years ago. But somehow, I mean, that effort actually didn't continue. I mean, when they created the A&M, the environmental agency, and tried to consolidate everything, I think it was a good effort, but didn't work that well. What has been your experience in Colombia dealing again with environmental permits?
Well, with environmental permits, it's more drilling permits that we're concerned with, and the environmental permits for drilling. To be honest, that part of the process hasn't been that big of an issue for us, and it may be, you know, because of where we've been drilling up in Antioquia, that was fine. And also, actually, we drilled in 2015 down in Nariño, and we also got a permits pretty quickly there. But you know, the broader issue in respect of the regulator, you know, I share your frustration in respect of the broader issue relating to the regulator in Colombia, and the even broader issue that Michael brought up, which is the G in ESG. So when in our view, and this may sound surprising to a few of the listeners, but in our view, the biggest risk in Colombia, or the biggest risks in Colombia, if we're going to use that traditional tripartite subdivision, are not environment and social, they're governance. You know, and so we can generally get the communities on side, and we deal with some pretty tough ones, like some of the toughest ones in the country, I think. But really, at some point, we need, whether it be government support in respect of security, mostly, or government support in respect of processing applications through to titles. That becomes in the end of the day, that becomes our biggest issue.
Okay. Bringing in Michael from Blue Lakes, do you have any sort of thoughts or questions for Tim?
Yeah, I do. I mean, Tim, we've been following you for quite a while, and I've been favorably impressed by the progress you guys have been making. In southern Colombia, my recollection is you were basically elephant hunting. And the fact that you diversified your activities, was it that the elephants were too hard to find, or you came to the conclusion that they weren't there? Which was it?
Do you mean diversified into Nicaragua?
Yeah, for example. Okay,
so no, not really. The issue was we knew it was going to be slow in Colombia. It is slow in Colombia. You know, look at the track record of Buritica, for example, and all the other projects that didn't even get that far. It's a very slow process of permitting and exploration, and you know, building that sustainable sort of community support. So we knew.
And you were in a very remote area in Colombia too. You're right down.
Well, we were. I mean, since then, in 2019, we bought Anglo Gold Ashanti's exploration companies holding most of their exploration assets up in the Middle Cauca Valley, and so we're all over the place now.
Yes.
But we were, yes, initially right in the in the heart of it. We knew that was going to take a lot. That Colombia is worth, and we still believe, of course, that Colombia is worth the effort, worth the wait, worth the patience. But if you want to survive and keep financing, activities like we propose to do, which is the grassroots exploration. You need some news flow and something that moves a little bit faster. And Nicaragua came up, and honestly, I mean, we've been very, well, I was very surprised. First time I went to Nicaragua was 2017, and straight out to the Golden Triangle out there, which is in northeastern Nicaragua. For those who don't know where it is, it's not the BC Golden Triangle, obviously, and that is an amazing district in terms of its mineral potential. Has its challenges like everywhere else in respect of social license, but no, it wasn't. So to answer your question, no, the elephants are there. It just takes it's a long, hard process to corral them.
Okay, one other question. What's going to happen after Ortega in Nicaragua?
Well, that's a really good question. So one thing that we know, and Remi, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but one thing that we know is the Sandinista Party is still very strongly supported throughout Nicaragua, and particularly rural communities in Nicaragua. But that might change depending on what happens with Ortega. Obviously we do our best to try and stay up to date with what's going on, and he's under a lot of pressure to subscribe to free and fair elections in November, and as we understand it, and Remi, feel free to pop in here, as we understand it.
I'll jump in 2 seconds. Don't worry.
As we understand it, there's a deal on the table in respect of his amnesty and what happens at the elections, and that's a deal that's been negotiated for a long time. It's involving the state of Mexico. It's involving the Vatican.
Good Lord.
So it's involving a lot of key players.
If you want me just put two-liner on Nicaragua, and then actually I have a question specifically maybe on Guintar and what you're doing on the western part of Antioquia, but on Nicaragua, just one line. Obviously, it's a conflictive situation after the events that happened like 2-3 years ago, and the history in Nicaragua. What's interesting maybe to note is that the property from Roro Road is actually in a part which is not so much impacted by the central power in Nicaragua and the traditional Ortega connections. There's also a history of mining in Nicaragua, from B2Gold to Mineros S.A. I'm not obviously a good company to partner with. About it, but so there's a consensus which is not completely opposed to mining in a sense. So even if the complexities of the reputational cost to be in Nicaragua, the people that might die in November 2021 because of bad elections like it happened in the past, this is actually not so much impacting the mining sector and the long term and the capacity for production in Nicaragua. Maybe my question, which is actually somewhat related, Tim, on the Guintar project, and that's indeed like part of those projects that you bought, exploration project that you bought out of Anglo Ashanti. It's to me a very interesting project. I think you're very much in the preliminary stage here there, but in terms of community relations, in terms of the history of traditional miners, which is not criminalized traditional miners, there's a real potential here. It's nice history also from the Germans, history of exploring in the area, but I think I don't know exactly of what the first test that you had, the drilling result. I haven't looked into those details, but do you think there's a potential for something interesting there, and the timeline to it?
Yeah, I mean, so there are three. The area that Remi's talking about is in Western Antioquia, and there are three tenements. So there are two titles which we can drill on, and then there's an application which we can't drill on until but we are moving that along to a title stage. Guinta and Niverengos are the titles that we're drilling on. That's a bit, if I compare that to Caribe in Nicaragua, where we're just drilling under laterites and hitting breccia, this thing needs a little bit more geology, but we do think we've honed in on deeper targets, sort of east-west, probably more dike-controlled porphyries there, and that deeper drilling is due to commence next month. Margaritas, which is the application to the south, we are in the process of arranging for the initial public audience to get that converted to a title. Now that's a bit more obvious, I would say, a target than Guinta and Ibarengo. Simply because there is a gold mineralized breccia body exposed on the surface, and that's the one, I suppose secretly we've been most excited about, because there are very few of those type of targets in that middle Cauca Valley that haven't already been drilled or aren't already mined. So I think it'll be the end of the year before we get a rig on that at the earliest, I would say, but by the time we've done all the permitting and everything else. But yeah, I see that whole district, and there's a chance those things all join up together. So the whole district is looking pretty interesting. You touched on, so in terms of the informal miners there, that's a bit of an issue, and the reason is mostly because it's difficult to formalize them, because they don't make it, they're seasonal gold miners, they don't make enough money off the thin veins. So we're really working on trying to, substitute their economic input during the, I guess it's the seasonal sort of coffee, during that off season for coffee miners. Yeah. So yeah, but all's good out there at the moment, and we're optimistic. And that's one that Mineros are earning in on, as you know.
Well, thank you very, very much for that, Tim. I think without further ado, let's move from Colombia and Peru and on to Mexico and Sonoro Gold. And say our next mining update, I think we'll just have the slides shortly up on the screen, will be from Ken MacLeod, who's president and CEO of Sonoro Gold. He has 35 years experience as an entrepreneur, financial and executive officer in the resource and energy sectors, having served as president, CEO and director of various public and private companies operating in Americas, Asia and Africa. So if we're able just to get Ken's slides up there, and without further ado, Ken, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure talking to everyone today. And I hope you're nicely settled in with your glass of wine, the few that have demonstrated the wine department. And so what we're focusing on here today is Mexico. There's a good reason for Sonoro to be totally focused on Mexico. And that is one thing that Michael brought up earlier, is the most important aspect of any company are the people. And so we have a technical team in Mexico that has over 35, 40 years experience in taking projects through all the way from early stage exploration, in fact, finding them first of all, then early stage exploration, all the way through development and into production. For example, our head of exploration, VP exploration, Mel Herdrick, he is an American citizen and has been living in Mexico for over 30 years. He was head of exploration in Mexico for Phelps Dodge for 13 years, joined Pediment Gold as one of the early insiders in Pediment Gold in 2004, acquired several projects in northern Mexico, drilled them, and developed two very, very important projects and deposits in northern Mexico. The La Colorada deposit, which is now being operated by Argonaut Gold, and the San Antonio deposit on the Baja Peninsula. Between those two projects, that's over 3 million ounces of new discovery. And Mel was the major component of these discoveries. Our mining engineer, Jorge Diaz, Mexican citizen living in Hermosillo, 35 years of experience in designing and building mainly open pit mines in northern Mexico. And with Jorge, he was the #1 employee of Alamos, which is developed the Mulatos mine, and in fact, they just produced the 2 millionth ounce of gold from that particular mine that just a month or two ago. And so these two are the key components of our technical team in Mexico. And between my colleague John Darch and me, we also have over 35 years experience in taking projects all the way through from early stage exploration to production in various parts of the world. So our technical team and our management team have a tremendous amount of experience. We collectively like to call ourselves a bunch of old farts that have over 200 years of experience in developing projects and taking them through to fruition. So this particular picture here is of our Cerro Caliche project, which is the flagship project for Sonoro. It's a 1,400 hectare project located 3 hours drive south of Tucson, Arizona, 3 hours drive north of Hermosillo. It's in an area that is 14 kilometers away from the nearest habitation. We're surrounded by producing gold mines. In Sonora State is the most important state in Mexico for gold production. In fact, of the 100 tons of gold production in Mexico each year, approximately 45% of that comes from Sonora State. So the area we're operating in here is, if you look at the picture and look over my left shoulder, we're 8 kilometers away from the Mercedes mine. And over my right shoulder, 14 kilometers away from Agnico Eagle's Sandra Gertrudis project. And you see the tailings dump for the waste dump for the nearby Cerro Prieto mine on the right-hand side of the picture. And this area in the foreground has now been peppered with over 40,000, actually 45,000 meters of drilling to develop a shallow deposit within 80 meters of surface, oxide heap leachable. And we're in the process now of taking it through the PEA stage, and with a view to being in production by Q1 of 2022. So this area you see in front of you over the next few years will turn into a very large open pit facility. Kelvin, if you wouldn't mind. Excuse me. There's a location at just 3 hours drive south of Tucson, and it's not a very good picture to see where Hermosillo is, but it's 3 hours drive to the south. And next slide, Kelvin. This one, this is here is it's an animated series of pictures of showing the property itself. It's an area that has been relatively undiscovered until the past 15 years or so. As a result, there were very few roads into the area at that time. And as you're looking towards the top end of the picture, you'll see the tailings or the waste dump for the Cerro Prieto mine. And this whole area here in front of us is mineralized. We expect that we've effectively drilled about 20–25% of the potential resource so far. And the area where all these markers are shown are the main areas for us to be putting in an open pit operation over the coming 12 months or so. So next slide, Kelvin, please. So here's a couple of animated views of the project itself. It's hilly country, which makes it a bit more difficult to maneuver around, but we've built roads all throughout the property now, and we're well advanced with the final phase of producing the preliminary economic assessment. And next slide, please. And this one, the next slide should show us the drill traces. This particular program here is it will be enhanced over the coming months as we develop the PEA, and we'll be able to add some pretty pictures which shows the mineralization along these drill traces. And next slide, please. But as it stands right now, there's over 450 drill holes have been drilled. The main central area we're showing on here is where we're developing the resource. As of July of 2019, we had identified 200,000 ounces grading 0.545. With all the drilling we've done since September of 2020, we should be quite capable of doubling the size of that resource and possibly a lot more in the next edition of the 43-101 technical report. So the next slide. So the intention now is to take the project through to production, like I said, by Q1 of 2022. We're continuing with the drilling program. We have 2 rigs operating 24, actually it's one shift. And these 2 rigs are producing 2,000 meters of new drilling per month. So a total of 4,000 meters per month is being produced. So far, with the success rate we've experienced, it's exceptional. Out of the 450 or so drill holes we have completed over the past couple of years, there's probably only 8 or 10 that I would classify as very little in the way of mineralization. So an extremely high success rate. The metallurgical testing is well underway. We should be completed by June or July at the very, very latest. And we completed the bottle roll testing. We got an average recovery rate of 80.3%. And we fully anticipate that the final column leach tests will be able to substantiate well in excess of 70 to 72% of a recovery rate. Now, the updated 43101, based upon the original 200,000 ounce resource, like I mentioned before, I fully expect that resource will significantly increase, at least double and maybe even more in the next edition, which will come out at the same time as the metallurgical testing completion. And then the other element, of course, is project financing, which we're working on currently. We're dealing with quite a few project lenders in that regard. Lenders that are actually quite capable of supporting us with at the PEA level, because this is an open pit heap leach oxide resource that is, for lack of a better term, it's a glorified gravel pit. So we're going to be moving the earth and processing it on the leach pad, and the recovery rate of 72%, according to our inside calculations, will yield a very, very good return on investment. And finally, the environmental permitting. There's one permit required for going into production or going into construction phase, and that is the environmental permit from SEMARNAT, the environmental agency. And that is underway as we speak as well. So I fully expect to have all of that in place by the month of July and enable us to start construction at that point. And then, so from going forward from here currently, we are a public company. The jurisdiction which we're operating in is probably the friendliest jurisdiction in all of Mexico. It is the friendliest in all of Mexico. And in fact, I would equate Sonora State at the same level of mining friendliness as Nevada is. And of course, with Sonora producing approximately 45% of the gold in Mexico, the economy, therefore, is highly dependent on the gold miners in the region. And we don't expect any kind of political issues to interfere with our permitting process. We certainly don't have any environmental issues, and we fully expect that by Q1 of 2022, we'll be in production.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Martin, do you have a question for Ken, or any sort of thoughts on Sonora Gold or the region?
Sure. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Martin.
Look, I have been in Hermosillo. Incredible experience. Really a hot place. Just a local joke. I remember people saying that people that live in Hermosillo don't go to hell because they lived in hell. But it's a really great mining jurisdiction, and I agree with you that great mines around the area. Can you expand a little bit sort of how you're envisioning the project in terms of size, capex, life of mine? I know you said that actually you will get to PEA. You're planning to skip feasibility and going straight into construction. But can you give us a sort of high-level view in terms of how you're envisioning the project?
Absolutely. We've done our own internal calculations on the potential size for the project, and based upon the resource that we identified to the end of December of 2020, it would support a 15,000 ton per day throughput. On the basis of 15,000 tons a day with a recovery rate of 72%, we anticipate that would produce somewhere in the order of about 75,000 ounces a year gross. Now, take into account the recovery rate, and that's a net 54,000 ounces a year. And so that was based, like I mentioned, on the drilling to December. Now, we have been very, very aggressive with our drilling program. With 4,000 meters of additional drilling per month for January, February, and March, and these will be incorporated into the next edition of the 43101. I'm expecting that the resource will increase substantially enough that we could possibly support a 20,000 ton per day throughput with a minimum of 5 to 7 year mine life. Now, the idea is that we keep on drilling all the way through the year as much as possible in order for us to build the mine life up to 7 years, to 10 years, to 12 years. And I believe that the project based upon the initial assumption we made last June of 2020, we estimated that the project is capable of supporting up to 100 million tons, grading 0.5 grams. Now, the translation on that one would be probably in the order of about 1.5 to 1.7 million ounces of potential for the property. So we have a long way to go yet to fully develop the full extent of the potential for the property. But I think we're the rate of success we've had with the drilling over the past 6 months has been very, very high. And I know that we're maintaining a minimum of 0.5 gram on average for the work that we've been doing, which suggests to me that with a lot of the projects in northern Mexico are operating very, very successfully on an open pit basis, heap leach basis, with 0.5 gram and less. In fact, Argonaut is operating with a 0.3 gram average at one or two of its projects in northern Mexico. So we feel very comfortable that we're going to have a very profitable operation. And the interesting thing I'm finding is the market does not necessarily recognize the value of Sonoro at this point in time. We have a market cap of less than $20 million Canadian, and the potential is that we're going to be producing in a year's time at the rate of net profit of possibly in the order of $35 million US.
And the capex for assuming that 20,000 tons throughput project, what is the capex more or less?
We're following a program of farming out the operating costs for the project. In other words, we'll get a contract miner to come in and mine, crush, and dispose of the waste. We'll also produce carbon instead of producing doré. So there's a savings cost there. So the total cost for the capex, including sustaining costs, would be in the order of about under $12 million US.
Wow.
But really, the infrastructure is not great in this kind of project here. As I mentioned before, it's a large gravel moving operation, and there's not a lot of infrastructure that you have. The biggest item would be the leach pad and the chemical plant that goes with the leach pad. And that's where the biggest cost is. And the rest of the cost would be in stripping prior to operation and hardening the existing roads to accommodate the 85-ton trucks.
Okay. Well, I think that, thank you very much for that, Ken. So we're going to move on to our final mining update, which we're going to switch sort of scenes from the Latin America to the Caribbean. So just as our final update, whilst my colleague Kelvin just brings the slides to the screen, Geophysx Jamaica is a mineral exploration company committed to modern, yet economically, ecologically, and sociologically sustainable techniques and philosophies. Their CEO is Robert Stewart. Robert, the floor is yours.
All right, so thank you very much. You can switch to the second slide. We are a total outlier and misfit in this group today. We are a private company. We're completely self-funding. We've been operating about 3 years, and we're actually not here looking for funding yet. What we decided to do in Jamaica has had a very spotty history of mining, of exploration. Apart from bauxite, there's been very little here, and the stuff that has been done repeatedly in the same places in the same sort of ways. So we set out to basically canvass the entire island. We've done 30,000 assays to date. We have had up to 10 teams a week on the ground around the island. And the bottom line is that we have now licensed what we feel is the most anomalous ground. And typically in the regional stuff, it's a minimum of 1 kilometer sampling. And in some areas much tighter than that. We have now over 3,000 square kilometers of exclusive licenses, and we have actually started drilling. We can go to the third slide. We presented this area in our last talk late last year, but we've now just started drilling. One of the things that COVID affected us with last year was we were going to do an airborne campaign. We had helicopter lease that fell through literally in March or April because of COVID. So we spent the year without some of the geophysical work we wanted. And in addition to that, we have hired a lot of overseas geologists to help with our work, who were very active until COVID started, but they're coming from places like Canada, the US, and Chile. Of course, some of that work was not moving as quickly as we wanted to. This area, the initial results so far have been good. We have not assayed yet, but we have rock samples up to 32 grams of gold, and we have some supergene samples up to 3 kilograms of silver. But it's basically a sort of a near neutral pH epithermal system, and it's very dense veining. And the first pad is basically to help us identify the structure where we have the biggest stuff at surface. And the second pad will be in the high grade zone. The next slide is one of the discovery areas. Jamaica is 70% covered in carbonates. And I think that has presented an obstacle to most companies in the past, especially in the older days where there wasn't as many techniques that could be used. And we decided that since nobody had ever looked over this 70% of the island, that we would campaign it with a few techniques. And one of the things we found is this huge anomaly that we're just starting to work on. So we have one drill working at Sparrow right now, and we have a second core drill, which is not going to run yet, but we're RC drilling this area. And we are just, we have actually just bought a helicopter. We're tired of trying to find a lease, and Jamaica doesn't have an industry, so we can't just pick up the phone and call somebody. So we will be doing a lot of work over this area and a few other anomalies that we found. We believe one of the other sites we're looking at could be a porphyry under some limestone cover. So this one is very exciting though, and we're continuing to work it. One slide can't show everything, but it's really a nice anomaly. And not sure where I'm at on time, Andrew. Am I still good?
Yeah. If you've got any more, or would you like to open it up to questions from the audience?
I think we can open it up to questions.
Great.
Before I do though, what Tim was talking about really excited me, because that's sort of what we've been trying to do here. It's uncharted territory. There has been very little work. We're a local company. We have really built excellent relationships with all of the governmental agencies involved, whether that be the equivalents of EPA or Water Resources or the Mines and Geology Division. The government here, as was pointed out, is recently re-elected, and we've got a few more years, and they are very supportive and very positive of what we're doing. They're very much looking forward to some of this to turn into a discovery. So that's our game plan, is basically to find these areas, define them, put a drill in them, and at that point, we will have something fairly credible, hopefully, to talk about.
So bringing in Michael Colligan first, has Bobby's presentation convinced you that you need to go back to Jamaica, but this time maybe not for a holiday, but go for a mining, go for like a mining tour? Well,
there's no reason that you have to do one or the other, is there? I mean, really?
No, you have to do both.
My observation when I saw the list of speakers was it would be a whole lot more fun to go to Jamaica than tramp around Bolivia. So if the area you're talking about, that you're looking at, is the first photograph that you showed, it looks rather forbiddingly steep and isolated. Is that going to be one of the issues that you need to address?
You know, it's in so many of these areas that we're working, even though there are no existing roads, in the days before the English gave up the island, they built a lot of forestry trails through many areas, and most of those areas aren't actually parks. So there are actually cut trails in almost every area of the island that could be actually improved on. they're overgrown. You've got trees this wide sitting in the middle of some of them, but it's not a challenge.
So you'd be able to bring drills in to actually do the underground work that you require here.
The first drill site we tested, we actually brought the equipment in by road, and then hand carried it up a little bit of the hill. The drill site we're currently at, we flew in. We had the helicopter support that site, but that is not going to be the standard. We know that we have targets that are much easier to access. We were just itching to get hold of this one. We hadn't been able to do a lot of the work last year on some of the other targets. We had enough geology on this site to drill, so we put the drill in there.
What's your business plan here? Are you going to create enough interest to get a junior miner to come in to JV with you? Are you going to create your own vehicle? How do you see this developing?
Yeah, so what we're doing first is we're taking the risk to do the exploration and try to find something worthwhile. It's obviously a big risk. It's something that we're funding ourselves. The idea would be upon making a discovery, hopefully, we would then talk to some other partners, whether it's a major, whether there's a local vehicle involved as well to get more buy-in locally. We've focused on building relationships locally. We've done a lot of work out in the areas that we're working. We've done a lot of work with the different agencies, some of the NGOs here, and we've gone out of our way to make sure that we have executed the whole program at a very high standard. And the points that were made about ESG, I think I agree. Some of the other stuff is very easy. The governance and the government agencies you deal with are really who you have to win over.
Bringing in, oh sorry.
No, I'm finished. Go ahead.
Yeah, just bringing in Remi. I'm just kind of very interested. You made some remarks about Jamaica in your opening kind of comments. Do you have any thoughts about Jamaica and any kind of questions for Bobby?
Well, my first question definitely would be to know, I mean, where to best vacation between Montego Bay and Ocho Rios. There's a third spot that I should know. I'm based in Miami. I can be there in 3 hours. Just let me know, and we'll be on time for the drink tonight.
Yeah,
look into Negril.
Yeah. Oh, okay, perfect. But more seriously, actually, I mean, I completely echo. I'm bullish on Jamaica. There's political stability there in terms of governance. It's much better than it used to be. Let's say a decade ago. And that's why, you know, even there's some level of history of mining with bauxite, and although there's calls from the opposition to shut that down, but that will not happen. So I'm fairly bullish and confident on the jurisdiction. In terms of equipment and roads, yes, actually, it's actually quite surprisingly not the worst location to be in. My question is more in terms of, and you're obviously in the early stage now, but in terms of local content, in terms of capacity to bring people on board that are, you know, quality labor, or the kind of regulation that you also see in terms of ESG from Jamaica that has an interesting progressive position in terms of climate change and other issues. How do you actually make sure to limit the cost down the road? Importing any kind of products to an island like Jamaica is more expensive than other places, usually in terms of mining jurisdiction. So it's a very open question, but how do you focus on the local content and maybe partnership with regional actors to be able to, you know, train the future engineers or help you for importing, you know, maintenance and services?
Yeah, it's been a very painful process. Jamaica does not have a hard rock metallic mining industry right now, so we are trying to start something entirely new. The bauxite that's mined here, all of the bauxite companies have various terms and agreements in terms of incentives for duty-free status on equipment and the rest of it that we don't have, because as a startup, we could actually qualify for about 5 different programs, but they all exclude mining because the only mining that Jamaica knows is bauxite. So that has been painful. We've paid a lot of duty today, but we're in the process of fixing that right now. Secondly, in terms of what was the other question you had before that?
In terms of building, you know, maybe regional alliances with different actors locally. I mean, I haven't looked exactly where you're based. Jamaica is a tiny island, but obviously it's not the same thing if you're on the east part of the west part of the country and different actors and presence there.
Yeah, so we have focused on building relationships with other people who are in different types of mining, and there's a lot of quarrying and a lot of limestone mining. But really and truly, the work that we've done is, there was something else you said that I was about to answer and I forgot what it was. But
for once I had a good question and I just didn't.
Yeah, no, I was dying to answer it too. It was a good one. However, in terms of the incentives and the rest of it, that's easy to fix. That's what we're working on. The government is a good government. I think that whatever that question was, it may have had something to do with what we're finding and what we think we can do with it. And we have had some interest. We're actually in some discussions with CAs right now on a couple of majors, which is very nice. I think they have liked some of what we've shown them. We can't show everything here. It's just too short. But in terms of another junior, that would be great. But at that point, we are already putting quite a few $1 million into this as it is. And really and truly, we're looking to actually put a drill in something and do something a bit more. The airborne campaigns we're about to start over the next month. We'll start the magnetic campaign with our new helicopter, hopefully, and then we're going to do a little bit of other work. So
maybe if you allow me a follow-up question on this. I mean, there's as many upstarting jurisdiction. I mean, you look at maybe Guyana or Suriname also at this time, that are coming much more with a Caribbean mentality, so different challenges, but a very interesting way of working there. You've had a big actor like Newmont, for example, in Suriname that helped take it off. Newmont has, if I'm not wrong, also some properties or concessions in Jamaica. There's other actors, larger actors that have some. What is the layer in terms of the mining sector in Jamaica with larger actors?
When we started, apart from bauxite, when we started out, there were only two companies, and one was Rio Minerals, who had a couple of licenses. We ended up buying those licenses as we worked through that area. Karubi was here. They're now called C3. We bought most of their licenses out a year or two ago because of something else. The drill site you just saw there was close to a couple of them. I do feel that if there's good news coming out of Jamaica, I think people will turn their attention back to it. But in the meantime, we've got our work cut out for us. But I think the potential is very, very good. It's a really prospective environment, and it has, only 30% of the island was historically even looked at because nobody wanted to bother with the areas covered in limestone.
Okay.
Great. And if you remember my last question in the future, just let me know and answer it. If you remember what I was asking, that was wonderful. Maybe on operational cost or something I can't remember. Andrew,
I should have brought a beer.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think we've just got time for just a quick poll. So I'm going to ask my colleague Kelvin if we can just put up the polling question on the screen, which hopefully just ties things very nicely up for the day. Hopefully we have the polling screen up now. Hopefully it's coming up on everyone's screen, and the polling question is, which mining destination do you find the most attractive? We've had 4 presented today: Colombia, Mexico, Nicaragua, and Jamaica. I'm not going to ask the 3 mining presenters because I know exactly how they would vote, but perhaps I can briefly go around the 3 investor guests, maybe starting with yourself, Martin from our RCF. How would you vote in this poll?
Out of those countries, for me, it would be Mexico.
Okay. And then for yourself, Remi?
It's a tough one. I like Colombia if it's in Antioquia, and I like Jamaica if you're a pioneer.
Okay. And then Michael?
Mexico, clearly.
Okay. It looks as if Mexico is the sort of like clear, obviously, winner in the poll as well. But certainly, I think the great thing about the presentation today from like all 3 mining presenters, it's definitely opened us up to the possibilities of Latin America and obviously of the Caribbean as well. I think we're now right up to the hour. So all that remains for me to do is to go and thank our guests, to thank our sponsors, Geophysx Jamaica, to thank you to Sonoro Gold, thank you to Roll Minerals, and also as well to Resource Global Network. Also a big sort of thank you to our 3 investor guests, who were Michael Colligan from Blue Lakes Advisors, Martin Valdes from Resource Capital Funds, and Remi Piet, co-founder and senior partner of Embellie Advisory. See you all same time next week. Thank you very much and have a good rest of the week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.
Cheers.